Hello, I'm Caroline Marshall, and welcome to Bump to Business Owner, the podcast speaking to mums in business, you. I'll be in conversation with some of the most inspiring women and mothers in enterprise about their journey, how they created their successful businesses alongside raising their children, and what that looks like in work and family life. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Bump to Business Owner. I am your host, Caroline Marshall, and today I am welcoming Grace Carter. Grace Carter is the visionary founder and managing director of the Metamorphosis Group, a business collective that embodies her dedication to creativity, craftsmanship, and empowering women. After owning her skills as a journalist, Grace founded Afra in 2017, a brand and campaign agency named after Afra Ben, the first British female playwright to make a living by her pen. With a dedicated team of talented professionals, Afra has flourished under Grace's leadership, forging impactful partnerships with leading organisations. Grace's entrepreneurial drive extends far beyond Afra. She established the Metamorphosis Group to serve as the umbrella for multiple entrepreneurial brands that resonate with her core values of mental health, social equity, and entrepreneurship. These include ventures such as Consistently AI, an AI-driven software solution, Business and Babies, which supports entrepreneurial mothers, and the Female Body, advocating for women's health and wellness. She is also the founder of the Fast Female Fund, dedicated to accelerating female motorsport through funding and mentorship. To highlight Business and Babies, which is how I first came across Grace and I'm proud to be an ambassador for, Grace wants to change the law. After discovering herself at the very start of her mothering journey and receiving 4 key business emails that needed her attention during her C-section, the law has been written for male entrepreneurs. And while all the large corporations, banks and governments are talking about the need to create investment pots for women to create better gender equity in entrepreneurship, no one is talking about the infrastructure also needed for these women to thrive. Business and Babies are holding their first summit on Monday, 25th of November 2024. And I should also mention that, Grace, you are a mother of 2 little girls, of course, after all of that and your journey. So, Grace, thank you so much. What a bio, because honestly, wow, what you are doing is just inspiring, honestly.
Thank you. It's so funny when you hear it back from somebody else. Like, it's like your life that you're living, but you don't really think of it in a third person terminology. And then as soon as you hear it back, you're like, oh, this person sounds interesting. Oh, it's me.
That's why I do it. I'm all about, because I just, I think we'd easily be like, oh yeah, I just do this. And I'm like, no, there's no just. Let's have a proper intro here and list your achievements, which you have many. I normally kind of start back at the beginning, but I'm going to start a little bit different with you. You started your business pre-motherhood, and I want to jump straight in and ask, because you're louder than me about the realities online, and I love that. Did you have any idea that in your plan to potentially have children, when you decided to go ahead and have children, that it would impact your business as much as it did?
I think I went into running my own business quite naively. I mean, it was, most business owners end up saying this, but it was quite accidental that I did run my own business. It was never, my pipe dream when I was younger was to become the editor of Vogue rather than to go and run my own marketing agency. So it was quite a roundabout path that I got where I did. But I mean, I consciously was aware that I wanted to have children at the point that I set up the business. I had been working, the roles previously had been often in London, and I knew I didn't want to commute into London for another role, because I knew that I was going to be having children, and that wasn't really practical. So I think children were definitely part of my consideration, but did I know it was going to be as hard as it has been? Probably not. But I'd say I went into it knowing that there was going to be some pushback. I don't think I ever went into it thinking oh, this is going to be easy. But it was just, I guess at that time, I don't think I had many preconceived notions. It was a bit let's just see what happens, see if this business actually takes off. I didn't know at what point I might become a mother. I always went into it with the mindset that it might not be a quick process. So I never really knew what was around the corner, which sometimes that's a good thing, because I don't think if I did know, I possibly wouldn't have done what I did.
I love that. And no, that's very honest as well, because it feels like you did consider it more than a lot of other women. I know I've spoken to many on this podcast who thought they could run the business at the same time. Did you always know you'd get some form of childcare in place?
So I always knew childcare was probably going to be a big challenge within all of it. So we only have my mum out of the grandparents available, who's amazing, like incredible. But when I had my eldest, she was still working. So she was amazing in that she went down to a 4-day week. She's a teacher, and took 1 day a week unpaid so that she could help me with childcare. My husband runs a business, not his own, but runs a large corporate in London. And he leaves at 5 a.m. in the morning. So I always knew that I wasn't going to be able to have any practical support, during the working day from him in that sense, from a childcare perspective. So I think I don't ever remember there being like a conscious discussion or conversation around it, but I think it was pretty apparent early on that we were going to have to consider getting a nanny or some form of childcare very early on in the journey because of me having my business. But even when it got to the point of actually needing to do it, I was quite resistant. I found it really hard to make that decision. I think there's a lot of unsaid things probably between my husband and I, because he's been with me since I was 17, so I think he knows me very well. And I think he always knew that like my career was a massive part of my identity, always knew that there was going to be an element of me wanting to continue to work. Like I've always been very ambitious. So I think there was a kind of almost unspoken thing that he knew I wasn't going to be giving full-time childcare to our child or children, throughout their lives.
Yeah, no, I can really relate to that. I think good to have those husbands who know from the get-go what you're going to be like, although you can't really give that advice to someone. So obviously you had Afra. Afra was your business while you became a mother. And Business and Babies, was that set up this year? What has been your driving force behind starting that?
So when I had my eldest, she's 5.5, I was 28 at the time, and I was a year into my business journey.
Wow, so soon.
Yeah, so really, I had a pregnancy before her, and that pregnancy, I think I fell pregnant 3 months into starting the business. So it was like motherhood and business for me has been very entwined from the start. But yeah, so I'd had the business for about a year and a half, and the clients that I had built up were I think pretty much all male, and we were doing a lot in the construction sector, which is obviously very unforgiving towards women. And I felt like I did not have the power to speak out about how I felt or was made to feel. I didn't openly talk about being a mother. I went to pitch for one of those clients 4 weeks after I'd had my C-section, and I never told that client that I just had a baby. I think they found out a year later, because at an event someone happened to know me and was like, "Oh, how's your baby doing?" And the client looked at me and he was like, "You've got a baby?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, she's a year." And I think he did the mental maths and was like, wow, that probably was like the time we were pitching. But I was so worried it was going to count against me, and yeah, felt very powerless basically, and at the mercy of my clients. And then this time round, having my youngest a year ago, I guess there was a few sort of differences. I mean, the business was a lot bigger, but we were therefore impacted a lot harder by me having a child, and I'd gone through a lot of personal struggle to have that child, and it'd been a really tricky journey. And when I had her, a lot of my clients dropped me like hot coals, and I went through a lot of mental health challenges as a result, because the stress was just incomprehensible. And I just felt angry. I was like, why am I tolerating this? Why am I letting my experience of motherhood be dictated in this way by other people? Why is there not the infrastructure in place? And it was really frustrating me, because I kept seeing all these posts on LinkedIn in particular, and news articles talking about, women could add £250 billion to the economy if we supported them. And the bit that no one was talking about whenever I saw
motherhood.
Motherhood. Like, I literally saw one of these posts like about 20 minutes ago, and they'd put all these questions of why are women not getting supported and why are they not progressing, and I was like, the word
you know the answer.
I was like, why is no one saying this? Like, I don't get this. So I just thought, do you know what, I can't I can't sit back and be quiet anymore. And because I'd been dropped like hot coals by some of these clients, I just thought, you know what, I don't actually have anything to lose now. Like, I felt a bit like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I already feel like I'm at the lowest point I could ever get to. There's no more damage anyone can do to how I feel. Like I might as well just go for it. And it was almost like, the words I've described is I felt this feeling of being like a phoenix rising from the ashes, in the sense that I just kind of went out there and said what needed to be said, thinking, well, like, what's the worst you can do? And actually, the thing that I thought was going to be career suicide for me has been the thing that has built my career, business, like, identity up to what it is now. So I'm glad I did it, but it was not an easy decision to feel like I should talk out about it.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. As you say, that's what frustrated me. And the reason for this podcast was the fact that we're talking about why women aren't getting funded, when the ultimate reason why, obviously historically, it's because we're the ones that become the mothers. And you really see it when you're working for men who either make you redundant or, like you said, have clients that will drop you because they. And I do wonder as well, because you've been really open about your mental health, so thank you for that. But do you think, because of the risk around your business at the same time as becoming a mother, has really, really been the contributor to that?
Oh, 100%. Like, I wouldn't even question it. So I've, like, through having both children, I went through various, I guess, mental health challenges for different reasons. Obviously, losing the babies that I lost created depression and complex PTSD for me, and that, although that was nothing to do with the business, like, that was compounded by the fact that I was still having to run a business at the exact same time as going through all those personal difficulties. But with the breakdown that I had after I had my youngest, it was without question linked to the business. And I had my daughter in November. I know that Christmas is always going to be a quiet time for the business. We'd had a relatively stable year last year. Like, it wasn't amazing, but it was all right. And I felt like I built the business to a point where I just about felt stable enough to actually have the baby. Not that I had any choice by that point, but I got okay. And then I had a client who was paying a substantial amount of money per month decide not only was he not paying any more money, he was not going to pay £35,000 worth of bills that he'd accumulated. And my team had gone, like, above and beyond for this guy. Like, that I'd lost so many hours trying to make him happy. And I felt like he very much used the fact that he knew I was having a baby at that moment to kind of really turn the screw. So, and this guy, I've had to go through legal recourse to try and get the money back, because he's using all of the assets my team have created. So I've had a baby. Wow. I'm dealing with legal matters around trying to get money. I've now got a cash flow problem because he's not giving us what we're due. I had another client who had decided to just stop a 12-month contract halfway through. I had another one who dropped us after a month with no warning. And although he never said it, the reason he gave, I would consider, was very much linked to the fact I'd had a baby. And it just felt like we were, like, wherever I turned, I was just like, I wrote openly on my LinkedIn post today that we lost £15,000 of recurring revenue monthly overnight, and I was our lead salesperson, and I'd just had a baby, and I'd got legal battles, I'd got cash flow battles, I got the Batman, knocking on the door saying, where's the money? I'd got my employees needed paying. And I'd been given an absolute pitiful amount of money from the government for my maternity pay, which didn't even touch the sides of how much it costs to run my business per month. And I was apparently not allowed to work because I'd been given this money. So I was like, sorry, but how do I solve this problem? Like, I literally, like, this business that I have gone through COVID, Brexit, sacrificed hours of my child's life to run, like, I have built up from my dining table to well over £500,000 turnover. I've suddenly got to just let this die a death because I've had a baby and because all these things have happened. And I just felt like I wasn't prepared to lose something that I'd worked so hard for because of all these decisions that other people had, made, because I'd had a baby effectively. And yeah, it was like, for my mental health was just so badly affected because I was like, it was like my business is like my baby, and it felt like I was, on one hand I've got all these hormones, I've just had a baby, I'm trying to breastfeed, and I was struggling to get milk, like my milk wasn't coming in, and I knew that was probably because of stress. So I was feeling frustrated about my I was feeling frustrated that I was so stressed because that was impacting directly nurturing my child. I was stressed because I was like, I know I've still got all these bills to pay, all these things to do, like that's not going anywhere. And I just couldn't see there was no support, no nothing. And yet I'm reading all this stuff telling me how brilliant female entrepreneurs are and how, you know, they're going to contribute all this to the economy. And I'm thinking, well, if my daughters and every other young girl that's going to come through the ranks wants to go into entrepreneurship, and they're going to turn to me and say, oh, you've run a business, like, you know, tell us what, you know, inspire us, like tell us what we should do. I genuinely don't know how I could say to them, yes, come and do this, come and do what I've done, come and have to deal with all this mental stress and pressure and the overwhelming feelings that I'm trying to deal with. And I got to the point where I felt, and it's triggering to say it for some people, so I will put a trigger warning here, but I got to a point where I felt like the only solution for me was not being alive, because I couldn't see how I could get out of this predicament. Like I couldn't see how with the business, like it felt like this shackles around me, but I absolutely loved my business. I love my job. I love what I do. And I just couldn't the only thing had to hold on for was my daughters and knowing that they needed me. And I was just in this absolute state, and the health visitor came round and she was like, you are not okay. She was like, I need to call a crisis team on you. And I was like, I don't want that. I can't have that, because, and I sat there and I was like, I'm meant to be successful. Like I'm meant to be this, like a business owner. Like I'm not meant to have, you know, to be sat like rocking in a corner, unable to like talk. Like I was like, this isn't who I am. And I was like saying to her, like, you wouldn't believe who I am as a person. Like I walk into big boardrooms of huge corporates and I pitch all this amazing stuff to them, and I'm like, this isn't me, like this isn't who I am as a person. And it just felt like I'd lost who I was because of so many things that were outside my control. And I just, like, I mean, she was amazing. She got me the support I needed, and I've been on antidepressants all year and it's massively helped me. And I don't think I'd have got through this year if I hadn't. But I was just like, I can't have this for any other woman. Like, it's just not acceptable. And the more I looked into the law and the kind of very pitiful amount of protection in place for women, I just thought, this is disgraceful and something has got to be done. And no one else seems to be doing it with any kind of gusto. So I was like, right, like, I'll have to take that one on, take one for the team. And so here we are.
Thank you so much for sharing this. So much there. You have definitely, you know, been through a horrendous time and through a year. And I know it's not easy stuff to share, and it won't be an easy listen for everyone. And it's almost like, I think it's really important to highlight this, is that like, similar to motherhood, you always hope things won't happen, but it's the same in business. You think you're fine and things won't happen to you, and it does happen to business owners, and it happened to you at your most vulnerable stage of your life. So thank you for highlighting that, and hopefully all this work at some point, you know, you've got a fight ahead of you, which you're not alone in, but will pay off at some point. But do you ever stop and think, is this worth it? What am I doing it for? Have you ever thought about that? You've shared so generously your other thoughts of quitting, of why you should be here. But if you thought the same in business, that sometimes you need to take a step back, have you ever thought that?
Yeah, all the time. Mainly because it's probably the most commonly used phrase to me, like by other people. Like I am told all the time, you should just stop. Like, why don't you wait until the girls are older? Why don't you wait until you've got a bit more money in the bank? Like, why don't you wait until things are easier? Like, why don't you just go get a job for a little bit of time and then come back to this when things are different? And I'm like, no, because that's not, like, I haven't worked this hard to just park it and to, you know, no one has said that to my husband. No one has at any point said any of this to my husband. And I'm like, no, I'm not prepared to give it all up. And I genuinely think I'm a very, very stubborn person. And I don't take no easily for an answer. And I think that if I was maybe a little bit less stubborn and I was a bit more, I guess, I don't know, like, I'm not particularly easygoing as a person, but I think if I was a bit more like, oh, okay, whatever, I probably would have just gone, do you know what, this isn't worth it. I think I'm just so dogged in my determination that I've maybe foolishly pursue it rather than like it being the right decision. But I've had so many times where I look at my friends who have had proper maternity leaves, a lot of the time funded, in full by large corporates. I've looked at my friends who have a lot less stress in their lives, who just, they just get paid the wage, they know where their money's coming from, it's a stable income, like life's not, it's not insanely exciting, but it's also very stable. And I think, gosh, that stability looks good. Like, I would love that. And there's so many things that I look to, but my husband said it really well, and he was like, we all have different chapters in life, and you can't compare your chapter to theirs, because whilst right now you might feel like you want what they've got, give it 10 years, they might want what you've got. So you're just going to be at different parts in your life. So I think that for me has been kind of the thing that keeps me going with it. And this saying of like, you don't know how close you are to success. People that failed often don't realise how close they are to succeeding. So I'm always that bit like, well, if I did quit, then what? Like, what would I have missed out on? So, yeah, I think I'm very much stubbornly hanging in there. But it's also a case of like, how do I change this so that it doesn't feel this way? Like, it should be, well, I'd like to think it should be enjoyable, and like we should be able to, I know business is hard whether you're male or female, but it feels like it shouldn't be such a tough battle.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's always important to highlight, while you may have friends who have had cushy leaves and things, there's so many jobs out there that don't give cushy leave, and redundancy becomes part of too many women's stories, including my own, friends of mine, people on my team, and motherhood have gone hand in hand. I always quite clear to also say statutory maternity pay is not much better than business maternity pay. So, and that's what I also feel about you building a brand, is when you get to the stage of having that in place, we can do it better and provide great jobs for women where they don't fear for their safety in career wise. And like I said, I'm a bit further along in my motherhood journey, Grace, and it really I went through a traumatic period, almost losing my second child and job loss and all of that. And when you start to do the healing and come out of it, you're like, actually, there's so much of it career-wise I wouldn't change. Because again, when you start to see the fruits of your labour pay off, even through the hard times, it's business ownership. It's 2024. It's not been an easy year for a lot of people in the ecosystem. But, like I said, the long-term game is that in 10 years' time, we'll be taking a lot more leave. And have a lot more cash in the bank.
I think you're so right. Like, I think, so to your point about the kind of the flip side of like people's experience of being employed and pregnant, so that has always rung true to me, in the sense that a lot of people have said to me, oh, you'd be so much safer if you're PAYE, regardless of whether pregnant or not. And I'm like, why? Like, I could be made redundant at any point and I would have no idea. Like, at least I'm in control of my career with the choices that I'm making. So yeah, I don't feel that way. And I think for me, although I think it's hard as a small business, where I look at it is like, how can I create that culture of change and demonstrate what businesses can be like for women? So we recently won the Hire 100 Culture Award, which was 100 businesses were chosen for it, for best culture for this year. And that was a really big thing for me, because we work really hard. Although my team's not huge, I work really hard to make sure that there's the flexibility. I've got some of my team are caring for children, some are caring for elderly relatives. Like, there's all kinds of different caring duties. I've had male and female team members caring. And for me, it's about respecting that, and respecting that they're humans that have human needs. And I always believe that everyone turns up to work genuinely wanting to do the best job that they can, and if they can't because they've had a rough night with their kids or whatever that might be, like, just a bit of compassion and a cup of tea goes a really long way. Because I think that loyalty gets paid back in other ways at other times, and you can't expect people aren't machines, like we're not AI algorithms, and I just think for me,
and so many big corporates want us to be. That's the depressing part about it, when the joy of it is that, like exactly you said, if you meet people with compassion, they go above and beyond for you in a different way.
100%. And I think one of the things I realised probably like 2 years ago was I'd been very much running my business how you're told a business should be ran, like, which as I've realised is very much built into the male version of the world versus female. And I kind of sat back and I thought, well, on the one hand, everyone's saying to me that as a woman running a business that I'm in the minority. And on the other hand, I'm running this business in a way that actually isn't very conducive to me, let alone the women in my business. Like, why? Like, actually, why don't I just lean into the fact that I'm a woman and start to run a business how I think they should be ran rather than how I'm told they should? And I kind of used that as my, I guess, my like secret sauce, you know, where I was like, actually, I'm going to be more vocal, and I was on my LinkedIn. I'm going to be vocal about things like having a period at work, and like the, you know, what women actually go through when they are bleeding heavily, and then they're in a meeting and they're thinking, I need to go to the toilet, you know, all these different things that women just don't have the space to talk about, or like what I mean, I haven't gone through the menopause, but what the menopause is like for women. You know, I have employed people who are going through the menopause, and what do they need? How do we support them? Like, what are the symptoms? So like brain fog, memory loss, like, you know, that could easily be attributed to poor performance at work, or they could be going through something that is totally out of their control and making them feel very vulnerable. So I think for me, the more I can advocate for women, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's as mothers, whether that's employed or self-employed, whatever that might be, use that platform in business as a woman, the better, I personally think. And I think the same for all women that have that voice.
Speaking about your platform, because it's grown incredibly this past year, and I fully believe, you know, I wish I had, you know, some of the guts to say some of the stuff you do, but I fully believe like that's needed. People like you are so needed. But and you said it's been fantastic for business, as you said. Has there been a dark side to growth on LinkedIn?
Up until very recently, I would say I've generally only experienced positive. At the start, I definitely had a lot more men that were, I guess there was a few kind of comments that they'd made that weren't okay, which seemed to have sort of disappeared off. So I think I've maybe just cultivated my community in a way that maybe they're a bit scared to say something now.
Yeah, they've just unfollowed you. They're not. Or there's enough women clapping back at them.
I definitely noticed some kind of notable people that I knew had unfollowed me, so I thought that was interesting. I mean, yeah, I've had guys trying to chat me up in my direct messages, which is just awkward. Like, I don't know what they're expecting to get out of that. But I know I'm not alone in that. Yeah, I mean, it's generally been okay. Like, I think it's been more positive than not positive. Like, I think when I first started, I was really worried about what was going to happen. I was worried I was going to lose clients, because I was openly talking about things like the fact that I was taking antidepressants, about my mental health, and I just thought this can't look good for business. And I think there probably was an element of it probably has affected business that, you know, I can't say for sure without comparing if I hadn't done it. I think it possibly initially might have, but like I'd write posts about, you know, like my mental health, and then like our clients would like them, and then I'd go to meetings and they'd be like, oh, we need to meet for a drink, and like, it built like a much closer dynamic.
They felt they knew you.
Yeah, and like I go to meetings now and people talk to me like they know me, and I don't know them at all because I've never read about their life, but they know mine intimately from everything I've written. And it does kind of like speed up that process of getting to know people and feeling like, for me, I'm a very like deep connector with people. I don't like surface level small talk, but deep meaningful chat, I'm there. And so it's quite nice because you get straight to that point of having connections, and people. The thing that surprised me the most is how much people have told me their stories in return, and like some really traumatic experiences, and have kind of sent me private messages, you know, thanking me because they've never shared some of those. And I think that any sort of like negatives that I could have had has probably been outweighed massively by the positives.
Do you think it's helped your mental health at all? Or like, have you ever thought with this, you know, you've gone through such a process with your mental health, have you ever been worried about social media impacting that, or has it helped you in some ways?
So I grew up with a family member who I would say had narcissistic personality disorder, never diagnosed but ticked every box. So narcissism is something that I'm very painfully aware of in terms of understanding that what it looks like, but also the vulnerabilities that typically lie underneath it. And I think I have been very aware and I guess concerned, if that's the right word, of not wanting to fall into the category of being narcissistic. And it's really hard when you are trying to grow a profile which is about you as a person, which requires you getting attention and engagement for your life and your stories, and effectively like blowing your own trumpet, but without being...
that's what social media is, isn't it? Although it's meant to be
Yeah.
social, it turns into that, doesn't it?
Yeah. How do you do that? And I remember sitting down with my team one day and I was like, do I come across like a narcissist? Like, I was like, does this seem self-promotional? And one of my team was like, no, because you're not planning on having any more children. So you're not actually going to benefit from the thing you're trying to achieve. So like, they were like, the definition of it, benefiting you is that you'd be getting something from it. So I was kind of like, okay, that makes me feel a bit better. But I think I'm quite self-critical and I'm quite self-reflective, and I've always been I've wanted to come across the right way, and sometimes I've worried that I haven't. But at the same time, the antidepressants that I take, I find have quite a numbing effect on anxiety. So I think if it wasn't for those, I probably wouldn't have done what I've done. But I think they almost blanketed that bit in my brain that would have normally gone, don't say that, that's a bad idea. And I think that's helped me not worry and be so anxious. But I've definitely then had people message me after certain posts and been like, oh, did you really say that? Like, you went there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like one of my team, like I get on with her really well. She messaged me, she was like, I just read about your period today on LinkedIn. I was like, yeah, I know I went there, didn't I? But at the same time, like, it had such a good response in terms of people, what the post was, saying thank you for being so open and talking about their experiences. But yeah, I've definitely had people that have been like, why did you write that? And I'm like, oh, was that a good idea? I don't know. But the more I've seen, like I say, the more I've seen positive responses, the more it's kind of fueled me and made me think, well, I'm not gonna I'm a Marmite character, like not everyone's gonna like me, and that's okay. Like if people like me, then amazing, and if they don't, that's fine. Like, we're not for everyone.
And the ultimate goal is to create impact and change with the work that you're doing. So, no one can argue with that. And I think it's incredible. And, someone has to talk about periods because 50% of the population has them. So your child is coming up to 1, which is amazing. How are you feeling now about everything when you look at how you were a year ago?
Yeah. It's been a really funny old year. I mean, in terms of when I look at, the economy's not been great, and it's been the hardest year as a business owner, I think, for everyone, regardless of whether or not they've had children in that time. Agencies in particular have been particularly hit by AI coming on the scene, and budgets have been slashed. And we felt that last year as well. It's probably been 2 years of budgets being cut. So it's been hard, and I think in some respects I just feel proud of myself that I'm still going, that I'm still standing, and I've fought my way to this point. And I think the thing I struggle with is a lot of people talk about me as though I'm succeeding and successful at this point, and I feel far from that. Like, it feels like I have got a long way to go in my own business to get to the point where I'm happy to just take that kudos. But I think that I've achieved a lot of things that I've procrastinated on over the years, and I've just kind of got them done this year. Like, we always talked about having an overarching parent company to the business. I've done that. We always talked about having other brands alongside Afra. We've done that. I always wanted to be a children's book author. We've done that. Like, there's so many.
You wrote a book this year as well as those other branches. Grace, you're on fire, literally.
Yeah, I wrote 2. So one's called The Girl Who Grew, and then the other's called The Princess and the Shoe. And The Girl Who Grew is about the potential of a young girl, or multiple young girls. But it's about advocating for girls' potential, but also showing lots of versions of what being a girl can look like, so that there's that sense of accessibility and representation. So I've done all those things that I've always wanted to do, and I think I just didn't overthink it. I was like, right, I'm going to do it. And all year people have said to me, like, you're mad, like, why are you doing this? Like, just do one thing, stick to it, and that's all you need to do. But for me, although it hasn't necessarily made sense to the outside, I'm a storyteller by trade, and all of the brands, all the work I've done, it tells a story of who I am as a person and what I'm passionate about, and it's about building that picture out of what that vision looks like for where women are supported and young girls are inspired. And I think that now I'm at a point where I just need to make these things work. Like, I need to make these things, I need to build the communities around them. I need to build the profitability into the businesses, like get the brands on board. And I think that's where the hard work really starts. Like, at this point, it's almost been like the fun part, like, doing all the creative work of getting these kind of ideas.
Creating it.
Yeah. But now it's the slog of, now it's like, actually, like, we need to make these things have the impact. Like, we need to show results for what we're talking about. And that's the trickier bit.
Wow, that's incredible. And I have to ask you, like, sometimes I'm like, I've just got, Upsource and this podcast, and I'm like, how am I doing this? Like, Grace, what does your week look like? Do you work a 5-day week? Like, just give people an idea, because I also think, so something I've been getting very angry about recently is I spend too much time on Threads. And there's a lot of women, actually, I was literally on there just before this call. There's a lot of women on there, and this isn't against the women, because I get it. They're coming from a place of their own desperation. They've fallen into a trap of trying to sell women something, basically trying to convince them that they can be a stay-at-home mum and work. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, is the realities, because we're not asking men of this, because it's ridiculous, because it's 2 jobs. So what does your week look like? You've already said that your husband, it sounds like he's in person most of the week, is he?
Yeah, so my husband works 5 days a week in London. He has started trying to work 1 day a week at home. But he leaves at 5 a.m. and he gets back at 5 p.m. But
5 p.m's not bad though. But yeah, that's a long day for you.
That's not too bad at all. Like, I'm really lucky in that sense. And so he works in seafood, and it's a 24/7 business. So they start early, and that means he does get to be home at a reasonable time. But it also means that his phone's going off during holidays, weekends, like everything. And then in terms of childcare, we have currently got a nanny 3 days a week, and then we have my mum 2 days a week. But my daughter is going to be going to nursery. This is going to be an interesting transition, I think, for us, because it's a little bit more structured and rigid, but also it's right next to my daughter's school. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they both get on. So obviously the eldest is at school, but we've had a nanny for 5 years, and that's been really great for flexibility for me in terms of school drop-offs and pickups, and like when I've got to work late, that kind of thing. And then in terms of how do I work, so I think I'm very much with you in the sense that we have to be honest about what it actually takes. There's no such thing as like overnight success from doing nothing. I think social media in particular has made it seem like you can do very little and get a lot in return, and then people feel very dissatisfied that they've not achieved that. I am a workaholic. I work very, very long hours. I get a lot of flexibility. So if I don't want to, I don't have to. If the girls have got something at school or doctor's appointments or whatever it might be, I can just dictate how my time is. But I work every day. I work evenings. I work the minute I wake up, I'm on my phone. I work, like last night I switched off at midnight, and that was only because the baby was crying and my laptop was too bright, so I was like, and she was in our bed, and I was like, this is done. But like, I'm constantly working, and I'm not for 1 second saying that's healthy. I think it's very unhealthy, and it's had a massive impact on my health as a person. And I think you hear a lot of people talking about burnout and well-being and the importance of it, and it's something I'm consciously looking at. How can I change that for myself? But the problem I have at the moment is that because it's such a tough economy, I feel like I'm having to do everything I can to kind of just keep our heads above water. Whereas when we had, ironically, after COVID, which you would have thought was like the worst time for business, we had a fantastic year, and my health has never been better. Like, I was going to the gym, like I was going to exercise classes 3 days or 3 times a week. Like in fact, I actually weighed myself for the first time at the weekend, which was depressing. But I realised that
don't weigh yourself. No one weighs themselves anymore.
You know what? I put 3 stone on in weight from when the business was doing really well to now, and in terms of the economy being different. And I would say that was because I was in, it was a different, like it was easier to look after myself, because everything else felt like it was looking after itself too. So I think there's probably a direct correlation between myself being well and the economy being well, and how hard it is in business. But yeah, I mean, I think we have to be real, and although I can to some extent juggle having the business around the girls, like my baby bashes the laptop when she's nearby. My eldest like goes on, like stands around me on calls and wants to like be in the background. And although we're a lot more accepting now of those things, like it is really hard to work when they're around. Like I hate it. It makes me really stressed. So I try.
And then you end up being a bad parent. You might be doing your job well, and then you feel like you're being a bad parent. There's a sacrifice somewhere, and I think we need to be very honest about this. It's
100%.
Sometimes you do it if there's a sick day, inset day, things like that, but it's not a go-to position, is it?
No, my husband said it really well when my eldest was just born, because the first few months I was convinced I could do both. And so when she was a month old, I was back to 5 days a week working, and I just used to have her on my lap, and I used to, just try and like get by. And he said to me, like, it was really affecting me, and he was like, you're currently doing 5 days of neither feeling like you're a good parent or a good employer, or working with my clients. It's like you don't feel like you're doing particularly well in anything. So he was like, why don't you change it so that this is where the nanny came in the situation. He was like, why don't you change it so that we have childcare 3 days a week, and you get to be a mum 2 working days and 2 weekend days. So he's like, effectively you're a mum 100% of the time 4 days a week, and you're employed and you're running a business 3 days a week 100% of your time, and you can be 100% in both situations. And he was like, although you're going to, there'll be some overlaps, ultimately you get to feel a bit more in control. And so I think because of it, although for me business and babies are so entangled, I have also very much compartmentalized those 2 parts of my life. So I don't feel guilty when I'm working that I'm not with my children, and when I'm with my children I don't feel guilty that I'm not working. Like, it's very much boundaries.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, as well as remembering what past Grace was like, because I think that's always really helpful to share when there might be, you 5 years ago listening to this podcast and seeing, well, everyone has different help, different privileges, different setups. The clear message is that we're not trying to do both at the same time, and if we are, there's an end game. And I can fully relate to you. I'm going to share right now, the economy's hard. I can feel it in myself. I'm putting in a lot of, like you, I'm the salesperson of my business, and it's a lot of work right now. That's the reality of business, to keep us going, because we had a great period after COVID. So that's the reality. It's we're living in this uncertain world, and we're all having to work extra hard because the ecosystem is all feeling a bit tough right now. So thank you, Grace, as always, for your honesty. I really appreciate it, if anything. And I love that you're so self-aware as well about your correlation to working hard, your stages of motherhood, and feeling well. We've had this real ongoing theme with the podcast of joy, and I guess I'm in a bit of a further along journey and had to work on my mental health. I was in therapy all of 2023, and I'm still on this huge journey of well-being. But a huge learning for me has been really carving out moments of joy that are selfish for me. So for me, it's going to the theatre, going to a dance class, and that, love it. Have you managed to find anything that feels just like Grace, that away from the business, away from your babies, that is like, that's pure Grace joy?
So when I talk about like when I was in a really good place with life and business, I used to go to bounce classes, like on the trampolines, mini trampolines.
I did it at Centre Parks. It's great.
Absolutely loved it. Like, I had this amazing instructor who was really like, she used to just like sing and belt out the songs, and like it was dark and the music was loud and like the lights were going, and I absolutely loved it. That's something I kind of miss, but she stopped doing the classes near me, and I was like, I'm not driving ages for a class. But I think one of the things that I definitely, in terms of finding joy, so I discovered when I was in my when I was 30 that I had ADHD, long before it was actually quite openly discussed as being a thing in women in terms of like late diagnosis. It's been quite an interesting thing learning how much my ADHD has impacted me in life. It's been a real journey trying to figure out like how it impacts me, and I get a lot of joy out of work because I get to hyper focus on something that I'm really passionate about, and I get loads of dopamine out of work. So I have always found work very therapeutic, and that's always been a challenge of like, how do you find joy outside of something that is so intrinsically linked to myself but is work at the end of the day. And so what I've started to do recently is think about what can I take from my work that I love, that because my natural inclination is to try and monetize everything that I love. It's like, how do I take it and it not be a job, but it still keeps my brain feeling the same levels of busyness? So for example, I've got a like paint by numbers kit that I've been doing at home, and like I get to just sit and like in the evening, and it's like I get to keep my brain busy, but it's not something that is work, but it's creative, and I love creative things. And then I love photography, so I went on a workshop to do a photography workshop at the weekend, which again, sometimes it's like photography can be a bit like a work thing because I run a creative agency, we do photography, but it's also like remembering those moments of things that I love doing just for me. And then reading is another one. Like if I can get time to read, I love just being able to get my head in a book. And I think just also the other things is like just getting, for me, joy is like getting to take my daughter to horse riding at the weekend, and on the way back it was just me and her, and I said, shall we go for hot chocolate? And she's like, yeah, let's go. And we went and sat and had a hot chocolate together outside, and just getting to be mum with her. And I said to her, we were sat that evening with like sweets and hot chocolate watching Strictly Come Dancing, and I said to her, I said something like, what do you love most about mummy? And she's like, I just love getting to be with you all the time. And I was just like, that for me is joy. Like it's just feeling like I can have those moments, and yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you forget how lucky we are, and yeah, I love that. There's so many moments you've actually listed out there, Grace. And by the way, so we're totally finding a bounce class in London that we've got when you're working in town next, we're going together, by the way, because I'm up for that.
I used to work in health and wellbeing in my previous life, and I used to do loads of really cool like exercise classes, like when they were coming out, because we were right up about the media. And there's so much cool stuff in London, and I do miss that. Like, yeah.
I can't write, but I want that job. Grace, well, honestly, it's been an absolute joy today. And I know this won't be our last podcast together, because there's always going to be so much to talk about with everything you are doing for our community. And I personally want to thank you for that, because, I started this thinking, people aren't talking about business and babies, and it needs to be spoken about. And the more of us there are making noise about it in different ways. And like I said, I'm an ambassador for you. I'm attending your event, and I cannot wait. I know it's going to be amazing. But also, how can the listeners support your cause here and find out more about you?
Obviously on LinkedIn, I am Grace Carter, which there are many Grace Carters doing many really cool things. But
there's like a singer. When I was looking you up, I was like, well, this is a famous Grace Carter, not the right one.
Honestly, there's so many. I actually had a Grace Carter message me once on LinkedIn, and she was like, I'm just messaging you because we have the same name and it's really cool. And I was like, oh, hi. So yeah, there's me, the GC.
GC. Oh yeah, let's say that.
I am the GC. And then, so you can obviously, Metamorphose Group is metamorphosegroup.co.uk. Business and Babies is businessandbabies.co.uk. Afra is weareafra.co.uk. They're probably like the three key ones we've discussed in this call. But yeah, if you go to Metamorphose Group website, everything links out from there, and everything on LinkedIn. Yeah, links to everywhere, doesn't it? So yeah, one way or another, you will find me.
Follow Grace, support the feminist content. We're all here for it. So, and Grace, you've been so openly honest about both business and personal life, and I think that's truly, truly needed. So I just want to thank you again. And I just want to say, like, well done. You're almost at a year of your second baby, and like I said, you mentioned you probably aren't having any more, and you've done amazing this past year. So well done, and take some moment not just to celebrate your daughter but you as well, please. Okay?
No, thank you very much. I am very much going to be toasting in her birthday later this week.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Grace.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, and thank you for all that you're doing too to raise awareness.
Thank you so much for listening to Bump to Business Owner. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please do rate, review, follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps us to connect with more mums and business owners. You can DM me on @BumpToBusinessOwner on Instagram, and I'll be back next week.